Right. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Sibcast, talking about Pure Excess by Todd McGowan. That's right. That's right. It's me, Luke.
It's me, Joel.
I'm Claire. Joel, say your name again.
Oh yeah, I'm Joel. Calling
Joel from LA.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm in Arkansas too.
Claire from Arkansas.
We're literally in the same town, just in different houses.
All right. Here we go. So, intro and chapter 1.
Yep.
Pure Excess. Yeah, this kind of all started with me hearing an interview with Todd McGowan where he was talking about the book. It was really interesting to me. I shared it with Joel. He was down, shared it with Claire. Claire was down. It's a fun little, point of convergence. I feel like, and this will be really interesting for us to kind of unpack, I feel like I'm definitely entering this critique of capitalism from a very different entry point than the two of you. The two of you might be entering from the same gate. I'm definitely entering from another gate. But here we are. We find ourselves in the same garden or courtyard, whatever.
Yeah.
The same field of wheat sheaths.
Exactly. The same convivial
Wheat fields. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so...
Well, Luke,
opening
I'm curious,
remarks. I don't know.
Well, I'm just curious if you were to elucidate a little bit about what garden.
Let's all speak to it.
Yeah, no, that's nice. A little bit, and even just in like a really like personal, just like, oh, this is what sparked an interest in reading this book. Period.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first, or do one of you want to go first?
I can go first. I've got a really clear idea where in terms of my like interest in learning about Marxism and stuff, that's a more convoluted thing. But like the most recent chapter was like in the past year or two, through the organizing work that I do, meeting this like 75-year-old Arkansan guy who is the 75-year-old guy, Arkansan journalist and activist. And one of the ways that he identified himself to me was as a Marxist. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that I might have the opportunity to learn about Marxism from somebody who is both a generation or two older than me and is like rooted in Arkansas and coming at it from able to engage in these realities of Bible Belt rather than like the realities of like thinking about things in cities in Europe or in like big cities in like the coastal or northern United States. And so we had a good little study group that went for a few books and read The State and Revolution by Lenin and read Historical Materialism by Bukharin. And especially reading State and Revolution, I was like really, 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 really excited and happy to be learning and like finding a lot of substantive kind of theorizing and explanations to be engaging in with how Lenin wrote and what he was writing about. And yeah, and so then it's been about like maybe 6 months to a year since that last round of reading Marxist stuff passed. And now I'm picking back up with something that's like much more like about like being in conversation with what those like original Marxist theorists were engaging in than about like it's cool. I have a little bit of that foundation, but not much, but enough to like kind of know what sort of Marxism he's responding to with the stuff that he's responding to in this book. He being Todd McGowan.
Have you read Marx directly?
I haven't read Das Kapital. I haven't read the Communist Manifesto. I have read some of his writings about like the French Revolution, and then one of his other books that's named kind of funkily. I forget which Marx text Bukharin's Historical Materialism draws a lot from, but like the ways that Marx's texts are titled is like kind of very historically situated. Like it's like, oh, it's in his book about like the French Revolution in the 18th century that he ends up like outlining a lot of the theory that we refer back to again and again, even though the book is called like the French Revolution. So I don't remember which Marx book it was. Hopefully sometime in our conversations to come, I can like pull out a little book of like a Penguin House Classics book of Marx excerpts to like refer back to see what Todd McGowan is pulling from here.
Yeah, show your true like scholarly bona fides by reaching back into that bookshelf behind you.
Exactly.
Yeah, this scholarly bookshelf.
Yeah.
How about you, Joel?
Yeah. I think for me, it's like, I don't think I've actually read any like original Marx text, but been curious about that shit and that thinking for a long time, I think. And I think in particular, kind of his theorizing around commodities, talked a lot about that with a neighbor of mine who is like philosophy PhD. And yeah, and I think a lot of my interest in that comes by way of making art and making this thing that in at least a large iteration of it becomes commodity, like art, selling art in commercial art world. And so I think that really, and then I think hearing Todd McGowan talk on the pod and hearing him talk about pure excess and the commodity and my experience as an art handler in private homes in Los Angeles with people who have art collections that need to be managed and handled and installed and moved and inventoried. Like, let's talk about excess, and so I think that, there's very much like a lived little fire in me that is like once a sharp critique of this shit, because I think it not just because like being in like the uber wealthy's homes is in itself like enough to make you be upset, but I think also when it comes to just like the art world itself and like my involvement in the art world in a place where that like is an industry in Los Angeles, that it's like, oh, I think there are so many fucking contradictions about how artists talk about, think about, and then actually like make and trade in their artwork. That's just like, I don't know, at least some way of getting at it and like critiquing it and trying to find a way to break into it. And also, most importantly for me, like actually do something different than that is by looking at the commodity and by looking at, yes, the lie that is pure excess, and just being like, let's actually call it what it fucking is, and you can't produce this thing anyway, whatever. We'll get into this more, but that's the teaser, and that's my coming into it. And then of course, like whatever, like I think of myself as like lefty and politically aligned in that way. So like, I just, of course I need to be at least familiar with.
I want to add to my answer that just in terms of like hearing Joel describe like his like the interest, like it coming from like engaging in art world. For me, engaging with like reading State and Revolution, I was reading it coming in from like an anarchist perspective of like having an ideology that is like the government and the state was created to like oppress people, to get resources and wealth from them, blah 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 blah. I'm still really long for worlds and cultures and societies that are doing things other than hierarchy, and where like we are more like deliberate and consenting in the forms of power and who has power and what kind of power they have. And so it was in State and Revolution by Lenin that he explains like the anarchists, like communists want what anarchists want. It's just that communists and Marx like give a path to that, whereas anarchists just expect the whole system to fall and then for us to build something up from scratch. And so that's wherever I learned that my like anarchist dreams of like being able to relate with each other without a hierarchy imposed on those relations, and being able to relate with each other without laws imposed on us by a state that doesn't have our best interest in mind. Learning that like, oh wait, like maybe like Marxists and communists like have kind of know what they're talking about when they like have a bit more of a plan for how we'd reach that, whereas anarchists just know.
But they have a theory. They have a theory for how to get there, right?
They have a theory for how to get there. Yeah. That's all.
Cool. Then, for me, I feel like I've definitely become more interested in critiques of capitalism since having kids. Like, for me, that was the turning point because, I mean, you guys know this, but if anyone else is listening, my wife and I own a business. My background's in agriculture and just kind of the business side of farming, of small farming and kind of small business. And like just small entrepreneurship has just always like fascinated me. I love it. More from like a building perspective. So I think it was easy for me to just see myself as, oh yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. My wife and I are entrepreneurs. We're capitalists. Yeah, just kind of working within that system until we had kids. And then it made me realize how anti-human capitalism can be and how much like Todd, the thing that, and I'll bring this up, but his whole focus on reproduction versus production, like really resonates with me in terms of, just with me and Natalie being in very much like that reproductive mode where so much of our energy is going into our 4 kids. It is so much against the grain. I mean, especially to have like more than 2 kids in our current society that I resonate with his critique of capitalism from that angle, which I don't know. I mean, if you guys are coming in from the left-hand gate, I'm definitely more from the right-hand gate, but I'm definitely, anyway, I find this so fascinating because it's like we're kind of we're all seeing there's something that's not totally right about what capitalism incentivizes or the society that is a result of capitalism. There's something that's kind of anti-human from different levels, and we might describe it differently. But for me, that's where the rubber hits the road. And also something that's just really fascinating for me, just think about commodity. My background being in farming is just how freaking hard it is to make a living growing things that are necessary for life. Like,
amen.
And that's another thing that just really resonates with me is that you're never going to make any money at all if what you're doing is sustaining people, pure and simple. And the only way we could really make money with our store was selling like more luxury gift items. Not necessarily luxury, not like high end necessarily, but products that people don't need. Because we started our store trying to sell things that like were useful, and that stuff doesn't sell, or you can't make money selling that stuff. So that's another way in which it really hits home for me. Because like in the small farm world, all these farmers are like, well, people just need to pay more money for their vegetables. And I think what I realized was people are never going to want to pay more money for their vegetables.
Interesting.
And anyway, Todd McGowan talked specifically.
This theory is fucking perfect to explain this.
Yes.
I mean, maybe we can like shift into the text then. Because I think like the overall argument he's making, at least so far as we've gotten into it, or his kind of like his angle into this is about the psychology that the commodity creates, the commodity form, and how the subject responds to that, right? And his thing is like, oh, Marx did not theorize this, and Freud did not integrate whatever. He's like, oh, there's a kind of this gap in like in the theorizing of Marxism and of like the psyche in relation to the commodity form. And it's like, I think that coming at what you're saying, where it's like, wait, why the fuck, where is this idea of value created on the consumer side of things, on like the subject side, the person buying the shit? Like, why do we not want to spend more money for vegetables, but we will spend more money for a fucking piece of artwork to like hang on our wall, and we'll pay shitloads of money to like move it around and get it hung and get it. I mean,
and then we won't pay money for vegetables. That's wild.
And if we're talking about like excess, it's like the excess of art collections. And I think he's also trying to find a way that is, and I really want to get into this because I think I'm like a bit trying to understand his like holding on to modernity. And rejecting capitalism. And I think that's a new thing for me, because I think I have always like, I don't know, a critique of modernity and capitalism to me feels kind of like one and the same. But he's like really trying to like pull those two things apart. And he obviously sees some value in excess, but not in pure excess. And pure excess is the sham of capitalism. Anyway, sorry, not to. I don't know how should we actually start?
No, that's so good. Well, I think we did a good job laying out the themes, and let's just kind of walk through it because I think we could easily just be all over the place.
Right.
And yeah, just to talk about kind of my own like philosophical background I bring to this, I'm way more familiar with classical philosophy, like Plato and Aristotle,
than
I am with the post-structuralists than I am with like theory. So Todd McGowan's kind of in some ways, a bit of an introduction to that current school. But anyway, so I'm really glad you guys are more familiar with that side of things. He does reference Kierkegaard. I'm familiar with Kierkegaard.
I got my PhD in Marxism. By the way, that's something I forgot to mention for the listeners. No, I didn't.
No, but I forgot the name of that one text.
That actually wasn't true.
Okay. Gosh, I freaking underlined the crap out of this book. I don't know about you guys. Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm just going to start with the first page. I mean, the first thing I underlined and starred was just the first sentence. Capitalist society begins when the commodity form becomes the paradigm for social relations. And I think that kind of touches on what you were talking about. I mean, he mentions how, the commodity form determines what people value, how they relate to each other, what appears significant. So, yeah, that's the paradigm that he's unpacking. And along with that, characterizing the commodity form, the promise of pure excess appears magical because it allows us to dream of overcoming all lack and experiencing unbridled excess. So I think that kind of lays things out right there.
Is there a spot where he makes the term commodity form more concrete? Or are either of y'all able to like put that in more day-to-day language?
I mean,
go ahead, Joel. Joel, you were about to say something.
I think he uses the term commodity form just to be like, to refer to kind of like the structure that a commodity inhabits when it is in the world, right? So like the commodity form is kind of this like the shape and characteristics that a commodity takes on in like a real existence in the world. And I think by talking about a commodity form, you're able to kind of like abstract away from any particular thing, but it's like the form of this thing. And so then we can start talking about kind of these more abstract ways of responding and dealing with the thing.
Yeah, I felt like it was illuminating when he brings in Heidegger. Do you guys remember that in chapter 1?
Yeah.
Because Heidegger talks about, the logic of the commodity form that puts everything on the same level.
Yes.
Within such a logic, we cannot see the priority of some objects over others. Let's see. So, Heidegger talks about modern uprooting from place renders us incapable of knowing the tool as what is ready to hand. What was the other thing? Because that's Zuhanden, German.
It was ready to hand versus like
present at hand.
Yeah, it's present at hand.
Yeah. I feel like surely.
So I think you're right. I mean, Joel, you're talking about abstraction. I mean, to me, just think about a commodity like wheat. To me, I mean, let's just go back to like, this pastoral, convivial
background behind us.
The background that I'm going to add.
Repeat flowing in the wind like this.
Yes.
In an endless loop.
Where you had maybe peasant farmers and they were farming their land and harvesting wheat by hand. And, some of it went to pay the landlord, but the rest of it, went to feed themselves and their animals. And it was their wheat grown on their land. And now wheat is something that you can buy futures in.
That's
And
I think
you buy a 50-pound bag of wheat and you don't know where it's from. To me, that's like that. It's the detachment from place, from a situatedness into an abstraction. To me, that kind of puts a finger on it. Does that help?
Yeah,
that's helpful. And it feels like really importantly, like that framing allows it to become like an economic thing, right? It like puts it into this world of like being traded and futures and blah blah blah. Like it is it is on the level of anything else by its value. Like it can just become this totally abstract and economically understood form.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
Joel, do you remember what thought I interrupted whenever I asked that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what's interesting, him talking about a psychic system, I mean, that brings in Freud, like you were talking about, Joel, kind of like laying Freud on top of Marx. And then him talking about all those, this is still on page 2, all those who invest themselves in capitalism must adopt the psychic structure to get by within the system. Those who don't find themselves excluded and left behind. And so I think it's so true. There's this inevitability. I mean, this is very much the water we swim in. And I think trying to live in an alternative way just leads to one running against a wall, like again and again. I mean, not that alternatives aren't possible, but I resonate with that sense of this is just, there's a ubiquitousness. I mean, it's almost like a tyranny. That's what I wrote. Tyranny of capitalism. Like, it's just the commodity form. It's inescapable. Even when you try to escape it, you can't. Even like the non-commodity becomes a commodity. Like even the local produce becomes a commodity. You know what I mean? It's like you're trying to do something different and you just kind of fall back into it. Anyway.
Preach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean the next thing I kind of highlighted was the following paragraph. The commodities' pure excess always involves someone's hidden sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that feels like that's the fucking kicker. And that is the thing that capitalism is always trying to like paste over. Like
don't look there, don't look at that. There's nothing, it's fine.
Yeah. Like you're getting all this shit and isn't that amazing?
Yeah, why are you complaining? Aren't you happy?
Yeah. Like you're living a better life than anyone has ever in the history of the world because you have so much more at the expense of no one, you know? And
Everyone's better off. Everyone's better off.
Yeah.
The thing that made me think about, have you guys heard that in traditional societies, they used to perform a sacrifice, like in some cases a human sacrifice, other cases an animal sacrifice, where they would build a house? So it would literally be like part of the foundation, like under the house would be some kind of sacrifice. And anyway, the way he talks about sacrifice just makes me think about how ubiquitous sacrifice has been throughout human history and usually involved in religious rituals. But what's happened in capitalism is it's been taken up, like the sacrifice has been taken up into capitalism and then obfuscated, like hidden.
Yeah, it's godless. It is like deeply godless.
Yes.
It's also a critique that he like kind of explicitly makes when he talks even about Marx missing the mark and being like, Marx didn't see this in part because he thought that like religion was so superfluous and whatever, but like actually capitalism takes that logic, twists it, hides the sacrifice. Says you can have it all. Yeah, no, it's so fascinating the way he talks about
But the sacrifice still takes place. And that's the thing that's almost like Luciferian about the whole thing. Is the deception that you're unwittingly sacrificing something, you don't know who, you don't know what.
I mean, that's it. Truly, that feels like, I mean, this is where it gets almost like, oh, it is so corrupted. And like everything that courses through capitalism is like this corrupted thing because it just cannot acknowledge the fact that it is building off the backs of other people. That's why we have such like this disparity. This is the fucking wealth gap. It's because and you know, it's just like, of course that this is what's happening, but the whole system cannot like allow for that to be spoken or fully acknowledged. It just can't confront. It literally cannot confront it because it only operates off of. I mean, this gets into the producing reproduction, right, Luke? Where it's like,
make that transition. Let's do it.
It's like, oh, it's always working off of overproduction. Like capitalism is about production of excess, and like, right, Marx talks about it through the excess of labor. That like, oh, the capitalist is able to like pull value out of like excess labor that the laborer does not retain, and the capitalist gets to gain profit from that. And then I guess what Todd McGowan is trying to add to that is where that ends up on the purchasing side of the things, where he's like, oh, there's also this excess in the form and in the psychic relationship to the form. And that excess is this idea of a purity where we don't see any of the sacrifice that goes on, like as a consumer, and we are drawn to that thing. But that the capitalist society has to only, it doesn't even, oh, well, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just ranting, but this is where he starts talking about the good, right? And like how there's no reproduction of the good for society. It's all about just production and overproduction. Claire, were you about to say something?
I was just going to read a quote. Page 11. When societies focus on reproducing themselves, they typically confine useless excess to periodic rituals, sacrifice to gods, investiture of the leaders, introduction of children into the social order, burial of the dead, and so on. This is not what happens within capitalism. Capitalist society brings a useless excess into every corner of its functioning because this useless excess is what keeps the economy running. In this epoch, there is no active exchange, not even one involving the most useful commodity, that doesn't rely on excessiveness. The turn from reproduction to production as the basis of the social order gives excessiveness free rein. The useless excess becomes the source of all value and the center of everyone's attention. So what does that sentence mean? The turn from reproduction to production as the basis of social order gives excessiveness free rein. What is that turn from reproduction to production?
The way I take it is related to how he talks about traditional societies, where the motivating factor for a traditional society was essentially perpetuating let's say the religious structure that was centered around a conception of the good. And so that was reproduced in how the children were raised, how society was structured, a kind of preservation of social forms. And traditional societies, to me, that's the reproduction. Simply production, essentially it topples this notion of the good, replaces it with like production for production's sake. So it's almost like this directionless, or it's like a headless machine that just keeps making. Almost no one's in control of it. Though you could, make some argument for like a demonic force behind it all. But anyway, that's another.
Jesus, let's make that argument. I do want to go.
No, not Antichrist, but it's just, Mammon. It's anyway. But it does feel headless. It's like a, propelling forward, but in what direction? No one's setting the course. This thing's just going.
And to me, it's got this sense of like desperately seeking, like in contrast to what you were describing about like societies that are reproducing. It's like having found the groove of what's good, and it's either that the groove of what's good is just producing, or like we don't. There's this like lost seeking sense to it. And
yes,
I think I come around to that because I'm just like, where the fuck, like where does this come from? And I don't know if that's something that's going to be explored later in the book or something that's written about in other ways that we can delve into. I don't think it's maybe necessarily something for this conversation, though it could be if y'all have thoughts on it. But like, I know in myself, like where seeking desperately comes from, in contrast to like feeling stable in like what I know and what I can reproduce. And that comes from just like being totally overwhelmed, or like having some sort of like triggered trauma numbed response to something.
Yeah, I feel like McGowan even touches on that with the way he talks about excess being related to the sublime.
Mm-hmm.
That, and this is getting into chapter 1, I believe, but he paints the picture of the way I imagined it was you have like, the price of a commodity, like what a consumer pays for the commodity. Part of that price is actually the utility. And then the rest of that, the difference between like the utility and the price that the customer pays, that is the excess, which is like a longing for transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, why I feel like this is connected, Claire, is that it's present in that dynamic is a seeking for transcendence. Seeking transcendence in the commodity. I mean, this is something he talks about.
Yeah.
And how transcendence is found in sacrifice, which let's contrast it to a traditional society where the sacrifice happened in the context of a ritual, where it was well understood what is being sacrificed for what. It had its time and place. Within capitalism,
it's unending.
Like we're talking about, the sacrifice is hidden.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's still that longing for the transcendence that comes from sacrifice, but it's a longing for that transcendence in the excess without acknowledging the sacrifice. If
there's like, I mean, I think of it,
a way to describe it.
Because I think of it, Luke, in the way you were talking about, like, a sacrifice happening like at the site of a home, right? And then the home is built. And there is actually kind of like this closed loop, like the sacrifice is clearly for something that has to happen. That is a form of excess, right? There's no quote unquote utility about that sacrifice, but it is for something. It allows for something to happen, you know, and then that thing happens. And what capitalism does is by cutting off a self-acknowledgement of the sacrifice, that cycle just never fucking closes.
Yeah.
It just never closes.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have billionaires. That's just like, I think that straight up, it's like, oh, this just like consumption or like this need, this more. I mean, yeah, it's like he writes the overproduction of the useless is not just necessary, it's capitalism's lifeblood. And then he's like, you know, it's like, he talks about, oh, if it's not growing, capitalist society is dying. The only other things that do that is cancer, you know? And like, but that is
so perfect. That is so perfect. Cancer is directionless growth.
Yes. And it's just like, oh, wow. It is like, God.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no
it's so pernicious. It's frightening because it does, like, without some sort of closure to its process, it just like runs and it does feel beyond control. it's like, wait, why? How do we do, like, what?
Have you heard of accelerationism?
Yeah. I mean, isn't that kind
Nick
of like
Land?
a Marxist?
Nick Land. I think I was sharing Nick Land with Claire. Remember that? Anyway,
I'm
he's
plugging
another
in my
contemporary
computer.
philosopher, but it's connected because Land's thesis is that the only way to get through this is just to freaking press on the gas pedal till it runs off a cliff. I
mean, we've elected the right administration to get there. So let's fucking hope that Tesla just, you know, it's like the gas pedal, like it's like not even asymptotic. I mean, I love that he brings up like Tesla stock because there's also just like an EV's like acceleration is a fucking straight line.
Yeah.
You know, there isn't the like that's necessary for like it's just up. Line goes up, you know? And it's like that. I mean, that's what, you know, maybe we're driving off the cliff right now. And
I don't know. Unless you can get off the train or out of the car or, you know, whatever metaphor.
Yeah.
For the record, I think it's cynical and unimaginative to think that that's the only answer. And I don't think that y'all are arguing anything different. I just want the record to show that there are alternatives to things driving off the cliff.
But I wonder though how much like the running off the cliff is not like apocalypse. Running off the cliff is like the thing collapsing.
Yeah.
Or we do need capitalism.
The communist revolution, like the workers' revolution, the proletariat revolution, for example.
I mean, that is a collapse.
Like there are these,
right? That is a collapse. Like I think we do need this thing to collapse at some point. And like running off the cliff is not like ending humanity or like a death drive. There's no way to bring this thing down except for to fucking bring it down because it is so
They took Joel out.
So.
Oh no!
Shit.
He ran off the cliff.
It's really gone. All right, well, what's the spicy thing that one of us are going to say now and see who's the last one standing?
Till Joel comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, just the topic of sacrifice is just something that's I'm still sitting with it.
You've been sitting with it before you even read this book.
I have been sitting with sacrifice.
It's part of what's like so in character for you to like, for me to like be reading this book and like see how much he's talking about this.
Yeah, but for a while. But the thing that's interesting in this book, McGowan, relates sacrifice with transcendence. That like utility, a usefulness does not allow for transcendence or enjoyment. It's only through sacrifice that we experience enjoyment or transcendence. And I've just been thinking about, so many things that I do on a day-to-day basis, like even just taking the time for this book club to read this book. Yeah. I'm sacrificing my time to do something useless, right? I'm reading a book about theory. I'm getting so much enjoyment out of it. This conversation definitely, is verging on the transcendent. And it's because I'm sacrificing my time to do something that has no real utility.
And I want to like that's one of the things that I really want to spend more time on, and like especially hearing there's a vibe to how he talks about what's useful and useless. I'll talk for a bit while you try to troubleshoot and see if Joel can get back on.
Yeah, it looks like he's not connected to the internet. I'm gonna share a link with him again.
Okay.
But yeah, keep talking.
Okay, let me find a good quote. And okay, so this is on page 14. Everybody listen as I read. A commodity has value insofar as it transcends its usefulness. When one buys a commodity, this transcendence is what one pays for. It is what interests the consumer every bit as much as the capitalist producer. The usefulness is included in the price, but it is not what gives the commodity its value. The usefulness is akin to the necessary labor time that goes into the fabrication of the commodity. The inutility is the point at which sublimity enters into the commodity and gives it its value. Even though capitalism directs sublimity into the commodity form and hides the role that the subject plays in the creation of value, it nonetheless relies on sublimity. Without the sublime, there is no value in the capitalist universe. The sublime is useless. And so he at several points within chapter 1, he's like kind of asserting that like we don't enjoy the things that are useful to us, that like we only enjoy the things that are useless because they engage in the sublime. And I'm like, I don't know there, buddy. And he makes certain distinctions. Like he's talking about a book and a book jacket. Right. And where is this part? He says he's talking about like books that have their dust jacket and have their dust jacket intact are much more valuable than hardcover books that don't have their dust jacket. And the dust jacket is useless. It's even like more than useless. It gets in the way. Like whenever you're reading a hardcover book, a dust jacket's a pain in the ass. And he says, not only is the dust jacket not useful, blah, 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 blah. There's a bit where he goes on and talks about like a book cover even itself. Like the cover of a book and having like a nice piece of art on the cover is like useless because the useful thing is the book itself. And I'm like, I don't know about that, dude. Like what makes text in a book useful? So there's certain things there around what he labels as useful and useless that like falls along the lines of like aesthetic beauty, as like the transcendent things, jewelry. But then he talks about books and like the text of a book as useful.
Do you want to connect with your computer, Joel?
That's what I'm doing.
Whoa.
Sorry.
That was a David Lynch cut right there. That was totally David Lynch style. That's
we got that. We got that on the recording, y'all.
But yeah, Luke, like you were speaking to like what's useless, the sublimity and the uselessness of like this conversation and reading. And I am not comfortable, and I don't buy, and it's not clearly defined what falls into the category of useful and everything that falls within the category of excess.
Yeah. This with having missed like the first part of this conversation.
You didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Okay. I do wish that he spent more time defining defining what he means by useful and utility.
Yeah.
I think that feels like it's so at the crux of his argument. And there are too many occasions where it's like arguable.
Can I read one?
Yeah.
Having sex without any intention of reproduction isn't useful, yet this is the only enjoyable form of sex, in contrast to sex geared explicitly towards reproduction. What the fuck, dude? Like, that's just a... are you gonna die on that hill? That's just a dumb fucking argument.
Yeah.
Just to give an example.
Yeah.
There was one point where I feel like he did try to define usefulness. Oh no! I really thought I tried to like make a note of that and write it out and be like, oh, here it is. Luke, what do you have a way
to me, I just reading the subtext between the lines. To me, utility for him is connected with survival and reproduction. So
sorry, I found the quote. So on page 36 in the last paragraph, or the paragraph that kind of like runs off the page, in the second sentence he says, for them, use doesn't refer to what is actually useful for the social order and its members to reproduce themselves. So I think that is his definition. Luke, you're right. I think it is about this idea of reproduction, reproducing a society. And now it's helpful, but it still begs the question of like, well, what are the ends of that? Is like the creation of art, the creation of like societal value. It's like, it feels nebulous. I feel like I just have to like assume things in order to, there's like this strict definition that he never outlines about, right, like what is strictly necessary to survive.
Yeah. I see your argument because the way he understands a traditional society, it reproduces its conception of the good, or like a religious structure around the good. And art is a means through which a society communicates the good.
Yes.
And so art in that context is directly related to reproduction of a society. Though it seems like he would categorize art as excess. Useless, as excess.
And I wonder, as we keep working through this book, like how, as he talks more about this modernity aspect, like if that's going to be where it's really consequential, what lines he's drawing between what's useful and useless. Because I feel like earlier in our conversation, when we were talking about like sacrifice and like reproducing the good versus producing, there was clarity to that. And it might become actually what he's the confusion around what's like useful or useless, or like what feels like kind of an arbitrary line there, or an ill-defined line, might shape up to be really consequential in the rest of the book as he's talking about what to hold on to about modernity. Let's see. We'll see. Stay tuned, everyone. You'll just be on the edge of your seat waiting to find out with the rest of us.
Okay, so we just happened to be on page, what you read from page 36. I'm looking at page 37.
Sure.
What I highlighted there. And I mean, it's like the second from the last paragraph, last sentence. We value inutility because we enjoy what we cannot use. I think that points us in the direction. I mean, this is kind of, we're on the trail here. What we cannot use. Do you use art? Not so. Anyway, to me, that's, I mean, you use food.
But do we use like the text in a book?
Yeah. But that, anyway, so.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right to say that this is his definition of utility. I just wish he like spent time just like really fucking laying it out, because it seems so central.
I want to add another aspect to this, but Luke, are you wanting to bring something else up or move to a different thing? I'm curious what you're thinking.
I'm still kind of stuck on the enjoyment of that which we cannot use related to experiencing the sublime. And it's almost like a via negativa that can give us a sense of what he means by what's useful. In terms of, he spends a lot of time talking about like the sublime and enjoyment. And so if we take him at his word that what we enjoy is not what we use. I just think about the things that give meaning and a sense of transcendence. Anyway, I just think about things like, I mean, definitely any kind of religious ritual, religious practice, or, hiking a mountain range, reading a good book, a great conversation. Anyway, I just, that's what I think about. And I guess there's a way in which, like, even a meal, like, I guess one, say after a period of fasting, one could really enjoy, like, plain rice and beans, which is just strictly kind of utilitarian, like, you're just getting your calories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's a way in which one could really enjoy sustenance, just straight up plain sustenance after a period of lack. But probably it's related to that lack that one experiences the enjoyment. If one's just eating rice and beans every day, one ceases to enjoy the rice and beans because they're simply providing for one's calories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like he doesn't lay it out, but like you can kind of circle around what he's getting at with utility.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? By focusing on the enjoyment aspect and how enjoyment works.
It makes sense to me. I think this also, like, let's see where the book goes, and if the book goes in this direction, and if not, like, how much the book can, like, add to this, that, like, I think there are glimmers of one of the escape hatches here in that sentence that you read. We value inutility because we enjoy what we cannot use, right? That's stating kind of that is kind of a pure characterization of our relationship with what we value, with utility, with inutility, under this fuck of capitalism. And every time that he would say that sort of sentiment, I was like a little bit resistant. And I don't know if I'm resistant because I want to see myself as special, or if I'm resistant because there's some truth to it in my own experience, that, like, one of the escape hatches is to be finding the enjoyment in the useful.
I think this is what I've been thinking about recently, is like, I'm thinking about doing ceramics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like doing craft, right? Like this thing that has utility, right? Like a craft ostensibly is something about, like, you're making something that is used, or whatever, the common definition of craft. But it's like, I'm throwing a bowl. That bowl is going to be used to eat those rice and beans. And it's like, this is a tradition that goes back far. Like, ceramics is, like, deep in us as people. And I fucking love throwing a bowl. Like, just that engagement of me with clay, with form. And so I don't know. I mean, I could argue for, like, the hard utility of that act, and that it is, like, a pure utilitarian thing to be a potter. And yet there is an excess in the very act of doing it that I am able to find. And I wonder if
it's not an excess, it's a sublimity, but it's not an excess.
But I wonder,
because making every bowl engages in that experience.
But I think the sublimity is excess on top of the thing. Because I'm like, you know what? Like, I am going to find the thing that is, like, abundant in this act.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to, like, indulge in, like, actually, this is so special, this thing that I'm doing right now with this material, and it is sublimity. But I think the excess is, like, that enjoyment. Maybe the excess is literally just the act of enjoying a thing, and not just taking it as utilitarian, not just being like, you know what, I'm only doing this because it will feed someone. It's almost like, I wonder if, like, in that sense, it's literally just a mindset. It's like, and maybe that's also, like, workers taking enjoyment in their work, like, finding meaning in their work is excess.
Yeah. So what you're talking about, Joel, you're escaping the commodity form.
Yeah.
And that is the excess, man.
Yeah.
Because you're not just creating any freaking bowl.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's inescapable in terms of this relationship to commodity. Because the excess for you is that the way you're making pottery is in stark contrast to the way most people experience pottery. Like that's the excess.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? Like so in my world, it's like growing the vegetables yourself is the
Yes.
excess.
Yeah.
If I was like a farmer in the Central Valley of California growing salad mix,
Yeah.
Taylor's Farms, spring mix, that's commodity.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm, like a 1 acre, CSA farm growing food for my neighbors, that's excess.
But also, if you're that farmer in the Central Valley bundling fucking like things of cilantro with your little zip ties on your belt, and you find a beauty in that, that's excess.
That's excess.
And
yeah.
that is where that feels like also where maybe there's this like tie to just like strict Marxism and like labor and like the worker of being like, oh, if workers are able to find an excess in their labor and they're able to like create this abundance out of this thing that otherwise is like just I don't know. Yeah. There's something
because that excess is something that transcends the experience. If you're simply looking at the experience itself, you're just another migrant laborer in another laser leveled field in the Central Valley harvesting another box of spring mix.
Right.
So that's the commodity form. You're an interchangeable cog.
Yes.
If you start to see what you're doing as significant, as having meaning, as connecting you with something higher, you're actually feeding people. That's excess because that is in some ways transcending the abstract commodity form of what you're actually doing.
And that is the thing that like punctures capitalism because it like capitalism does not allow for that excess to exist within, I don't know, there's something.
The thing that was crushing about me working at like me being the donut kid at the gas station and like making all this shitty food. Yeah, y'all remember that? I was waking up at 3 a.m. to go work at the gas station because I was pissed that they were building that gas station next door. And I was like, well, fuck it, I can just go make donuts there instead. But the thing that from my 2 months of that, those were the 2 months of my work that job was like the most lowest of the low job that I've had, like just the most like laborious and like where you're just laboring and there isn't able to be pride in what you're doing, because we'd be making food that was shitty food and then we'd be throwing that food away, and then we'd be making more of that food that was shitty food and then we'd be throwing more of it away. And so for the way that production of like veggies and salad mix works is that you're fucking doing all this work to make this salad mix and then it ends up rotting on the shelves at Walmart and then donated to the food pantry and then like rotting in somebody's fridge even though they're fucking hungry because they didn't get it 2 weeks earlier. And so that is a way that it strips that the excess and the sublimity of the excess is stripped from the integrity of the worker and instead made into a physical excess. And then it just fucking sucks.
Yeah, there's like waste is such a critical part of this like capitalism that he outlines. Like waste is integral to the commodity, and it's also shunted aside as ever actually being acknowledged.
So maybe we can think about capitalism like stripping the sublime from abundance and instead doing weight there's something key that we can experience from like the abundance of the world. Capitalism then turns into waste. It's that's the form of abundance. Is waste.
Yes.
I think capitalism.
I see that. Yes.
It's kind of like capitalism's excess is like utterly wasteful, because it cannot. One thing we're leaving out of this equation is like this idea of lack, right? Because he talks about how important lack is to this idea of excess, right? He's like, that's a sacrifice.
Yeah,
right?
That's the sacrifice.
And capitalism doesn't doesn't recognize the lack. That's why it's a pure excess, because it's, but that I think that is about waste. Like pure excess has to do with waste, whereas like the excess we're talking about somehow incorporates within itself lack. And anyway, I think we need to try to find a way to balance these things, right?
There's excess. There's excess in like capitalism supreme, which is waste and not acknowledged excess. Like the excess is like kind of, I don't know how to get at this either.
Well, I drew
a picture.
Okay.
Whoa, nice.
Thank you.
So this, I just added waste down here, but this was at the end of the introduction. Wait, is this all backwards for you, or is it just for me?
It's just backwards for you.
Okay.
It's backwards for me.
So there's excess is related to the good.
Yeah.
And what did I write here? Beyond something, going beyond what is good. Excess is going beyond what is good. And then there's like lack, right? And somehow this triangle is modernity versus pure excess, which denies any lack and it therefore severs its relationship to any good, finds its something in the commodity.
Joel, can you take a picture of that and send it to me, and I can
put it in the show notes
here.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, you can put it up here?
Yeah, like kind of sharing my screen so we can all look at it.
Okay, that's great, because reading that mirrored is really a challenge. Let me tell you.
I thought that was fun.
Yeah, I'm very proud. That's a nice diagram.
I mean, yeah, I think there's just something, right? Because like there's like the excess, and then excess is about what's going beyond the good, but then it's acknowledgement of lack, like that there's something lacking that makes excess worthwhile. Like that's like kind of this triangle that he's saying that modernity exists within. And then what's been glommed onto modernity is capitalism, like capitalist modernity, which has to do with pure excess. And that's only about enjoyment, and it denies any lack and therefore severs its relationship to any good. And it finds its form in the commodity. Somehow like waste is the byproduct of that versus good. I don't know. This, something.
Oh my Jesus, get this. Page 28. Capitalism, while Luke figures out the tech for maybe this diagram.
Did you text that to me, Joel?
Yeah, I texted to the three of us.
Okay, I haven't got it yet.
Capitalism lives on enjoyment, but makes it impossible for the capitalist subject, while remaining a capitalist subject, to recognize the source of the enjoyment. The disguise that capitalism creates obscures the enjoyment of lack through its promise of more. One doesn't recognize that one is enjoying what one doesn't have in the guise of pursuing a commodity to have. This obfuscation produces an investment in the commodity form. The turn from good to useless excess that capitalist modernity effectuates creates a society that thrives on instability. And that just goes back to Tesla going steady, faster.
From the good to useless excess. Yeah, I see. Instability because of the headless nature of it. No point of stasis.
So the disguise that capitalism creates obscures the enjoyment of lack through its promise of more. So capitalism is not about lack, but he's saying that like lack,
it's the fucked up other side of it.
Yeah.
It never says the word lack, it just says there's more.
And I think that's like the byproduct of that is waste. That there's just like excess is just fucking waste because there's nothing. Oh wow, look at that. Because there's just like nothing again, kind of like in that idea of like the sacrifice of like at the foundation of the home, creating something that is like a closed, like a steady, it's a stability. It is a stability.
Yeah, stability.
That there's like a purpose for this, even if it is excess, that excess is born of lack, which is like literally the sacrifice of a life of an animal or a human. Like that's the lack there, but it's the excess is the act of this thing that doesn't have a strict utility, Yeah.
But, so where you have modernity, the kind of triad of modernity.
Yeah.
Could we also call that traditional society? And excess could be the transcendent, lack could be sacrifice, and good would stay the good.
But I think
is that still the dynamic?
but I think he's trying to make an argument that modernity like democratizes these things. Like it's not just traditional society because that's not modernity.
Yes,
You
but
know?
I'm just trying to relate it to you talking about the animal sacrifice under the
Yeah,
house would
you're
be in a
right.
traditional society. I'm just trying to
Right.
wonder if it's the same dynamic.
Yeah, no, good point. Okay, say that again.
Yeah, so
Make
if
the
we just call
analogies.
excess transcendence, we call
Mm-hmm.
lack sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
and the good stays the good.
Which is the
That,
reproduction of society, right?
to me, the good would be like the telos, the direction that the society is pointed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like that dynamic, that triad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
would that also describe a traditional society?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah, I don't see
so.
why not. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious where he if he's gonna go more into like what distinguishes modernity, or like what returning to modernity, or what creating it, what stepping into modernity looks like, a non-capitalist modernity that isn't stepping back into like the triads or whatever of
Well, I think
like,
because I think modernity has to do with like I don't know if he's literally says democratization, but that's like the sense I get from what he's trying to describe is like that is accessible to everyone, right?
Yeah, to me, the way I interpreted it was there was something about modernity that broke open the good, that an individual wasn't trapped within a predetermined notion of the good.
Hmm.
oh,
So there's a way in which
huh.
one could almost direct one's life towards more or less an individual good as
Mm.
opposed to a social good. So maybe it's the same dynamic in a traditional society. That triad would be shared by a
Mm-hmm.
community,
Mm-hmm.
like inescapable if
Hmm.
you're bound by that society.
Yeah.
And then a
Yeah.
modernity that applies more to the individual.
I buy that.
I do too.
Yeah. And I think like the pure excess then, because it denies lack, it is just never its byproduct never becomes useful again. Like it doesn't create, it's like this utter denial of what is useful. Its only thing is to create more. And that's just waste. Like that's just straight up waste. Whereas before, even the thing that was excessive of the use somehow still maintained a relationship to what was lacking to allow that to happen. And therefore, like, was bound in some way within this relationship.
Yeah.
What capitalism does is it because it severs that relationship to any sort of lack, it just like keeps fucking producing and it's just wasteful. It's just wasteful. Like there's nothing bounding that thing. There's nothing holding it. There's like nothing that it is for. It's for nothing but itself. It's like, right?
Yeah, and to me that's related to being unbound from the good.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying, there's still that relationship between excess and lack. What he's saying is that relationship is inevitable. The commodity form hides the sacrifice or the lack.
Mm-hmm.
It hides it,
Mm-hmm.
but that relationship still holds.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is it's unbound from being directed towards the good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, related to that, I did find where he specifically addresses kind of the question we had, which was on the bottom of page 28.
Yeah, that's what I've been looking at.
Okay,
Okay.
where he's saying capitalists, well, let's just start with that paragraph. Okay, this revolution that capitalism inaugurates away from the good is an emancipatory one. Okay, so he's on board with that. Capitalist modernity enables us to see the priority of enjoyment relative to good. We can see that the value of the good lies only in its readiness to be sacrificed for the sake of enjoyment. Modernity frees us to enjoy what we lack rather than pursue the good. But to arrive at this point, we must toss aside capitalism's demand.
Keep reading. Keep reading.
The challenge is to create a modernity without capitalism, a society that privileges excess over the good, but recognizes that the enjoyment of excess depends on lack. Whereas the fantasy of a pure excess separates us into those who have and those who have not. Recognizing the bond between lack and excess is inherently egalitarian. It marks a step outside the logic of the commodity form and its demand for pure excess. There can be equality only when we stop submitting to the dominance of the commodity form. So there you have it.
I wrote with that sentence, we can, like, in the first paragraph you read, Luke, we can see that the value of the good lies only in its readiness to be sacrificed for the sake of enjoyment. I was like, unpack. Can we linger on those first couple sentences there?
I put a bunch of question marks by that. I have strong disagreements with that.
Yeah.
Can we get to that another time? I want to go lay in the grass soon.
Yeah, it's
and I do think that this. I think that we are at a we're at a pretty good conclusion point.
Yeah, because I think chapter 1. I don't know. One thing, a little gripe about this book is I'm like, dude, you don't need so many examples.
Yeah, you're like I got it.
It's like it's like, okay, you could have moved on.
The popcorn, the skull cap, the Oreos.
Yeah. The book, the fucking like records, like dust jacket, like we get it. We're good. You know. Because I think I don't know how much more I gained out of the first chapter.
He just illustrates what he lays out in the introduction. Yeah, but that is something to unpack. I think that's probably wise to save that for future discussion, but something we definitely want to put a pin in, because just the value of the good lies only in its readiness to be sacrificed for the sake of enjoyment. So to me, I'm sorry, I have to say this. He's elevating enjoyment over the good.
Yeah, he is.
And I think that's almost the revolution of modernity to me.
Yes.
That McGowan's pointing to is, in a traditional society, you have the good, which is binding. It's putting a limiter on what people can enjoy, how people can enjoy, how people in that society can experience transcendence.
Yes.
It's relative to the good of that culture, that society, that religion. So modernity, what he's saying is like the good becomes, it's almost like subservient to enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoyment becomes, in some ways, like the pinnacle.
Mm-hmm.
Like the good is a means to enjoyment.
Yeah.
And more specifically, like the sacrifice of the good.
Yes. The good has to be sacrificed. Exactly.
The good has to be sacrificed, and recognizing that is the thing that we're sacrificing is what gives us enjoyment, which capitalism somehow like obfuscates that whole relationship. And
which I don't know, man. That's just like too much. That's a little too boomer for me. I don't know. That's a little too like 1960s. Honestly.
It maps like if you're going to make an argument for what's good about modernity and what modernity offers, and like Luke, I thought that you put things so concisely when you're talking about like modernity is about the individual and what the individual determines for themselves rather than what the society determines. Like if this is what his bias is, it's like liking modernity because what it allows for the individual to enjoy outside of the restrictions of what the society deems as good, then like that maps, and like that's not the world that I want. Like what a traditional society defines as good is because, or can be from some traditional societies, because that is what allows not just human life but all life to sustain and reproduce. And that sacrificing good for enjoyment reminds me of the shit that frustrates me about Teslas, where you're like more concerned about your own personal enjoyment than like what actually like functions naturally.
I mean, agree with all of this, and I wonder if he's just going to get to a point, because he seems to also be invested in this idea of society reproducing itself versus just producing, right? So I wonder how he like brings back in this idea of like societal reproduction, even when he's saying modernist society allows us to sacrifice the good for the sake of enjoyment. Where does reproduction fit into that thing? I don't know.
Yeah, because reproduction is sacrificing enjoyment for the sake of the good.
Yeah, because get this, if you have babies, it does not feel good.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to do that. That sucks.
Lucas, being the only one who's had babies amongst us, did that sex feel purely lacking.
I'm
in
like,
enjoyment.
fuck that. Like I want to feel I want to feel the sensation of like making a baby. Like that seems like the most awesome. I mean, I'm saying that on like live TV. That's kind of weird, but like,
enjoyment.
fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
What's not enjoyable about life, baby?
He's too much of a hedonist to me. Like an individualist hedonist. That's why I called him a boomer.
Yeah.
That is why you called him a boomer.
With a sneer on your fucking face.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
He's getting high while his kids wander around Woodstock.
He was like, that sex sucked. Yeah, y'all fucking suck.
No,
that was the worst sex I ever had.
I'm not being very generous, but I do think that's probably like the major disagreement I've encountered with McGowan so far.
Yeah.
I think his critiques of capitalism are pretty spot on, but just what he's positing to me is kind of twisted.
Yeah, well, I'm just like how are you going to redeem modernity for me? Because that's something that is like so corrupted to me in my mind, and I'm like, what from this are you going to pull out and like try to resurrect? Because that's his project. You know, that's the project of this book as he's outlined it. Yeah. The challenge is to create a modernity without capitalism.
Get it? Let's see.
So let's see.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's see what you can throw at us, dude.
Let's see. Because honestly, I feel like all three of us, our bias is more towards some kind of collectivism.
Yeah.
Or communitarianism. I don't know the best term, but something like that, right?
Yeah.
A shared conception of the good. I think we're all on board with that. Now, let's not get.
We were all raised good Christians.
Let's not get too much in the weeds and how we would define the good, because I feel like we'd have disagreements about that. But I think we all long for a society where there's a shared conception of the good. And I think that McGowan is opposed to that. Is that
this? I don't know. I honestly do not know. And I think that's what we're going to have.
We'll see.
We'll
see.
Yeah.
I'm giving him a chance.
What I do think is he's forming some sort of
What are you doing, Claire? You're tired. You're going to go touch grass.
I think this triad, he's maintaining this triad. So I think lack.
Yes, but it matters what's on the tip of the pyramid.
Yeah. We'll see.
Interesting.
Okay, go smoke your joint and lay in the grass.
I was just going to lay in the grass.
Smoke the grass.
You rolled one fat joint. Oh, sorry. I mean,
I'm going to edit this out. Jeez Louise.
Let's go back to the positions we were in.
You're making Claire's.
Oh, yeah. Wait. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
This is great.
Y'all.
So glad we're doing this. Okay.
Yeah. So when is our next?
I think in 2 months.
Ooh. Oh.
Get it. We're taking it real easy.
Yeah. The problem is I have like freaking 3 other book clubs.
Yeah. What the hell? Okay, you put this on the calendar already. 22nd.
Sorry, it's my fault.
That's so funny.
What is
what I do. Reading? I'm sorry. I have a problem. What's that?
What else are you reading?
So reading Kierkegaard.
Because
that was like the split off of the Philosophy Club, which now we're reading Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. So getting into like Stoic philosophy. But there's a group of us that wanted to keep reading Kierkegaard, so I turned that into the podcast. Because also, like, the guy who actually has a background in philosophy, like has an undergrad in philosophy, he moved to Connecticut. So anyway, that's why we're doing that. But
y'all talk via podcast rather than meeting up.
Yeah, but I still have like this local group that's kind of, now doing Stoicism. And then I've got like the book club I've had for a while, which is made up of, I don't know, like maybe there are 6 to 8 of us, and whoever hosts picks the book, and it just kind of depends on who's hosting. We read all kinds of things. I think the book we might be reading is one on like animal tracking, or One Straw Revolution, or I don't know. There are a bunch that were suggested, but that's kind of all over the place. But it's fun. The last book we read for that one was one on fly fishing, which was a little hard for me to connect with, but.
So then you're going to animal tracking, which I get. We're from the same family. I'd connect more with animal tracking than I would with fly fishing.
Anyway, yeah. So
what book do you want to plug, Joel? Listen, because we're going to meet in 2 months, and then we're going to have completely different books to plug, in addition to the book that we're reading together.
Oh my God, I'm enjoying Kim Stanley Robinson so much. I'm on the third in the trilogy, the Mars trilogy. I'm on Blue Mars. We're almost done with Blue Mars. And I just finally, like in the past maybe chapter or two, realized that Blue Mars, the Mars trilogy is a precursor to 2312.
No, for real?
Yeah. So, Luke, he's so fucking good. He's so good. He's like literally an author who I read and I'm like, oh, this opens up the possibilities I can imagine for this world we're living in right now and what is possible in it. I don't know.
Which of his books did you give me?
Did I give you New York 2112?
Yeah. I have
Did you read it?
No.
Okay, it's long and it's dense. I mean, it's fun, but
no, I just need to wait for like a vacation or something to crack it open.
Yeah.
I don't know. Pick up a book every once in a while, Luke. Come on.
Amongst your 4 other books that you're picking up for your book clubs.
I know. I try to encourage them to pick books where there's an audio book that I can listen to. But
yeah, Kim Stanley. I mean, so good, so good. Claire,
The Next American Revolution by Grace Lee Boggs.
Is she still alive?
No.
Okay.
No, she died in the past 10 years.
Okay.
And so this is, I mean, speaking of that Tesla just zooming over the cliff. This book has been framed. I'm needing to really like shed things from my life right now because I'm stressed out and overwhelmed. And so I'm like, this is the only book that I'm reading, though I'm reading this one for my relationship with y'all and the good discussion. This is the only book I'm reading. I'm not watching fucking movies or TV shows. I'm just reading this book and making music and poems.
Hell yeah.
But it's a short book. It's not like it's not going to be particularly scholarly, but she's right. Like her relationship with Detroit is one that is like what we do once that Tesla has crashed and all the worlds that we can build together and how people how her organizing communities in Detroit have survived through that crash and like opened possibilities for what our world can be.
I mean, in a totally different way, but like a similar way. That's what New York 2114. Fuck, I forget the date anymore. He has too many books that are like titled by their dates, but that's also like what actually do we 2140. Thank you.
Hey.
Yeah. Where he's like,
yeah,
this shit's gonna happen. This shit happens.
Yeah.
Society is still gonna be like what are the forms of society that we want to pull through to make this shit more of what we want to be living in.
Yeah, and I find that topic super fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, gosh, big picture level, we're like at the end of liberalism. And
boy, are we.
Moving into something else. You know, a post-liberal future, which... To me, the more I think about it, it's more of like a multipolar, decentralized future, you know? Like, what I see is like the coexistence of many different communities with their own conception of the good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, like what you're saying. It's figuring out what that would look like, but it's so context dependent and location dependent.
What? Yeah.
Opening a can of worms at the end of this one.
I don't know.
That's a can of worms? That's a can of jelly beans.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, do you guys resonate with that?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just think...
I mean, I don't know if that's what's coming next, but that's the world that I want to live in.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's like still fucking there is globalization. It's just like, we're so globalized. Can there be that thing? Like, we're so deeply entangled. And maybe that is also part of what is like falling apart right now.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking. Because to me, the liberal world order is globalization.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like global capitalism is the thing that's crumbling.
Y'all, I want to smoke that weed and just think about all the societies before us that were all connected and then crumbled and then were separate and then globalized and became connected and then crumbled and then got separate.
Yeah. So anyway, Claire's saying good night.
Good night.
I love you.
This is great, y'all.
This is awesome.
This is good.
Can't wait.
Looking forward to the next
and
one.
for all of you out there, thanks for tuning in.
Okay. Talk in a
Alright.
month.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.